How's that for an introduction? Okay, let's talk about why we are really hosting this conference in Copenhagen. It is called COP15, not because it has anything to do with Copenhagen. You could think so, Copenhagen. It doesn't. It's good for the branding of the city, but it's unrelated. COP is an abbreviation for Conference of the Parties. In this case, Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Climate Change Convention. A pretty old thing, and this is the 15th annual conference of all the nations of all the UN nations coming together to review the convention and what needs to be done. But this is a very special COP because we're in a situation where the Kyoto Protocol, the first real attempt at doing something about climate change in an international way, it is about to expire. It expires in 2012, and people are saying, what comes after this? It's not like the problem has diminished in any way, shape, or form, so we need to look at that. Therefore, at the COP13, which you might calculate was 2 years ago on the island of Bali, all the UN nations came together and agreed to set a deadline for agreeing on what comes after 2012 in Copenhagen at COP15. That's why there's so much talk, not just in town, but everywhere about the Copenhagen conference, is because all 192 nations agreed to set themselves Copenhagen as a deadline for agreeing on what's next. The last COP was COP14 in Poland, which was sort of a stepping stone, a review halfway of between Bali and Copenhagen, how far we had come. Now, this is a small country, and this is a big conference. And just to put that a little bit into perspective, seen from my desk, what I do is not substance, but logistics. I need to do the meeting here in practical terms. And to put that into perspective for you, the size of this is a very large conference. Not just because there's a lot of people coming, but also because it doesn't play off over 36 hours as most summits do, but this is a 2-week event. And if you look at the volume of a thing like this, how many meals, how many transportation kilometers, how many hotel room nights, what's the cost drivers, like the number of police hours, you have to look at the volume. Duration times the number of participants. So if you look at it that way, we're actually looking at an absolute Super League monster summit about the size of 20 European councils. And those of you who have covered European Council will know that those are not small events. The budget for this is something of a very large nature, especially for a small country. We're looking at several hundred million Danish kroners on this, on pure logistics and police work. The largest bill being police work, just the manpower of manning a conference like this in a secure way. Another way of putting it is, and this is really where I spilled my coffee about 2 years ago when I traveled to Canada and talked to the former COP11 hosts and asked them, how do you do this? What is this conference like? Tell me about it, how it works. Might be a little bigger in Copenhagen, but tell me how it works. And they threw up this gigantic organigram on the PowerPoint and said, this was our small organization for handling this. That's when I spilled my coffee of what I had gotten into when accepting this job. But also, if you look at it, they had a logistics secretariat of more than 200, and communication secretariat of more than 200 people. So why are we only 20? It's not because we're more efficient than the Canadians or anything. They're a great help and inspiration for us. We're doing many things like the Canadians have done. But basically it's a matter of strategy. We're 20 people as a secretariat in the foreign ministry, but we're outsourcing a lot. We've sort of said if we want to be flexible and if we get a complete buy-in from each team member, then we can be no more than 20 by default. Then we have to outsource the rest. This is just to put it into perspective what we're dealing with. Whoops. All right. Now, the first question when you plan a conference is how many do you expect to arrive here in Copenhagen? And if you look then at different experiences, you can say there was Kyoto, the COP3. There was a little peak in attendance. This is showing you for all the COPs up until now how many people were there. You also had a peak over here at COP11, which was Montreal, or you could have pointed to COP6, which was in the Netherlands. Why were those two little peaks? Well, those two were peaks because this took place when a COP takes place in either North America or Europe, there's a tendency of higher attendance. The reason probably being that there are more media, there are representatives, there are more NGO headquarters around these areas, so the participation grows. Also, then you can say, we went to COP13 in Bali and had a new record participation there. Why is this? Well, some people say it's the beach factor. I don't think so. The reason is probably that somewhere between COP11 and COP13, this whole issue about climate change on a global scale really exploded. This is sort of the time frame when a lot of politicians gave up their climate skepticism and says this is a real problem, this is really man-made, we need to do something about it. So some people, the skeptics, will still say it's a climate hype, but a lot of people of us will just say that we're still in an engagement period with climate change. And this will also take place in Copenhagen. My point with this slide is just to say that all of these things are coming together in Copenhagen. We have a prospect for a deal, just like a Kyoto. We are in Western Europe, so from experience, attendance is higher. And finally, we're still in a phase where climate change is absolutely on the top of everybody's political agenda. And all these waves come together to raise expectations and the size of the summit in Copenhagen. When you then add to that for the first time, for all these COPs, we're now talking about a possible segment for participation of heads of state and government. Usually this has been left for the past 14 COPs to mostly to ministers for the environment as heads of delegation. But now we're talking about decisions of such a magnitude that many people are judging that it will be necessary to engage that level also because there's so many sectors involved, such a huge financing deal to be discussed, that it's not really something that can be left for ministers for the environment. Now, the verdict is still out on that, and one important date for that to look for signals might be tomorrow, when the UN Secretary General is hosting his climate summit in New York. So look for that. So when we estimate, we say we expect, this is numbers we calculate with the UN, 12 to 15,000 people to be here in this center, accredited out here, accredited by the UN. We are building a solution so that we can handle these yellow numbers. 10 to 12, it is okay. People might say you could have saved a little money here or there, but we're within the margin of error. 15 to 18,000, we will survive. There might be a little queuing up here and there, but we will survive. But in these numbers, we're in trouble. Above 18,000, Copenhagen might be too small a city. Below 10,000, we'll really get in trouble for how much money we spent on this. This is the same breakup of the participation level for the first 15 COPs, but now we're not looking at just the number of participants, but actually also at who is participating. And there's one major difference here compared to many other summits and international meetings that you might be covering. And that's the green part here, because the green part shows NGO participation.